Hey, my friends, thank you for joining us today on the Leadership Center. Once again, I have Moses Kahn with us today. Hey. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me.
So, part one, we've been talking about the 3's of leadership. Yeah. And part one, we really talked about relational integrity, having to do with people, being right in our faith, being right with people, being right with ourselves. Yeah. Today, we want to talk more about the idea of direction and movement. Yeah. And so before we give the three parts of this working definition, tell us what you mean by direction and movement as it relates to leadership.
Yeah. So leaders have clarity and they have movement. Leadership is about having clarity and having movement. And so this list that we're going to get into is all about that. Direction and clarity is all about clarity and movement.
So what we're saying here is, hey, leaders are responsible to create momentum, to create energy, direction, obviously in the right place. And so three things that we talk about: the where, the why, and the how. So the where being the vision. We know that vision is a huge part of leadership. It's probably the number one thing that leaders provide. Where are we going? Where are we going? Number two, and we'll break it down. Number two is, well, why are we going? So why is the purpose? Yeah. Like, why in the world? As a matter of fact, Simon Sinek says, we always start with the why. Because if people don't understand the why, they're probably not getting on board. Yeah. And then the how, to me, is the way or the strategic thinking behind it. So let's start with the where. Let's start with vision. Leaders provide vision. This word, Moses, is so overused in my mind. But tell us what you see, what you think about when you hear vision and leadership.
Yeah. So leaders, it might be overused, this word, but it is imperative to leadership. You cannot have good leadership without vision. And I would say you need to be able to communicate the vision. So it can't just be something in your heart or in your head or something you feel. You as a leader need to clearly define, where is it that we are heading as an organization? Where is it that we are heading as a team? Where is it that we are heading as a group? And so you have to have this definition clear. If you don't have it, people don't have it.
So can we say this is not just about results? This is not just about, hey, we're here to make money or we're here to sell product. At the end of the day, this is our DNA. This is what we are. I've heard people. Even about Starbucks, for example, they say, well, they're not in the coffee business, they're in the experience business, or even the status business, that, you can have a coffee any way that you want. And so that is what they're really selling. That is really their vision. So we're talking about, here's the destination. Yeah. At the end of the day, here's where we want to arrive.
That's
yes?
Right. Yes, absolutely. That was well said.
Okay. So number two, we have the why. Why? This is our purpose. Why do we exist? So tell us a little bit about that in leadership.
Yeah, you mentioned Simon Sinek. I think one of the other things he says there on this why, he's got a whole book and lots of stuff to say, but he said, people don't buy your what, people buy your why. And so you have to know, okay, what is the purpose? Everything we do has to have a why that connects back to our vision, connects back to who we are and where we believe we are going. If you are unclear of the why, then you are going to be wasting your time with menial tasks, with things that aren't actually creating movement and momentum. So if vision is about clarity, the why is about movement and momentum. And so if you don't have the why down, then you're not going to be creating movement. You're going to be stagnant as an organization, as a team. You might be checking tasks off, but you're actually not headed anywhere. There's no real gain, growth, and momentum occurring.
Right. So if this is about existence, I mean, to me, even the why connects back, because these are all connected, to the relational integrity. Yeah. This is who we are. Yeah. This is why we do what we do.
That's right.
Because it's our DNA.
Yeah, and this is important because even when you want to start new things in the organization, new projects, new ventures, you got to be able to define the why. We can't just be doing things because they're exciting or they're trendy. We have to connect it back to a why so that we're creating that movement and momentum in our team and organization.
What about when the why is a negative? Like, well, why are we doing that? Or why should we try this? Or why should we spend money on that?
Yeah.
How do you deal with that why?
Yeah, I think if you have people like that, they have not bought into the vision. And so if people are questioning the why, either there is no tie between the why and the vision, and so they're confused as to, well, why are we doing this? This is not who we are. This is not what we're about. It doesn't make any sense. So there could be that. Or it is connected to the vision, but they haven't bought in the vision the same way you've bought in the vision, and so there needs to be some sort of teaching and training done there so that you have buy-in from your team, and they're as passionate as you are about the why because they bought into the vision.
Wow. So they see the vision. We know where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
They understand the why and they've bought in.
Yeah.
And now it's the how. Because if we just stop at those two, I'm not sure that we still have direction and movement. We may have an idea, but how are we going to get there?
That's right.
How are we going to cross that bridge?
Yeah.
How are we going to attack this? How are we going to accomplish this? How are we going to make money? Whatever it may be. Tell us a little bit about the how, which you call the way.
The way. And so leaders don't always have clarity on this. I have to say that. They don't always have clarity on this. However, it is still important to them. And so you as a leader might not have clarity on it. And so in that regard, I think you need to learn as a good leader to build a team that can help you develop the way. So the way the way you can refer to systems, programs, things set in place, the way our organization runs, who takes care of what, all of that is part of the way. How are we actually going to make this happen? And what are the things that we need to set in place, systems, teams, operations, and the rest of it that are going to allow us to get there?
Yeah. You know, I think one of the mistakes that leaders make is that the visionary leader is not necessarily the strategist. So in other words, they may have the vision and the direction, they may even answer the why, but a lot of times they are not strategic. I like what you said about maybe it requires team members to come to the table, people that are talented in other ways that can now literally put the nuts and bolts onto the thing. Because many times I think the leader himself thinks, okay, now I'm the strategist and I've got to create the way, and they're just not good at it.
Absolutely.
And I think it's okay.
Yeah.
I think it's okay to just say, this is not my area of expertise.
Yes.
You know, here's what I see. Like, for example, you could design a house in your mind and say, well, this is what I want the house to look like, and I want so many rooms, and I want a pool in the back and whatever, and the fence to go here. But you're not the builder.
That's right.
You're not the one that is going to put, shovel into the ground. And I think leaders sometimes they just feel, okay, I have to be everything.
Yeah. That's a false sense of leadership. And I think it might even come down to, number one, not understanding that there's delegation involved in leadership, and that as a leader, you don't have to carry the entire weight from start to finish. You do carry the weight of vision, you carry the weight of purpose, absolutely. But how everything is done, the systems and the things involved in it, that is not a weight you need to carry. That is a problem you need to solve. And that problem might involve bringing in other people that are beyond you. And so I would say sometimes leaders can get stuck and frustrated because they're not seeing the vision come to pass. The why isn't happening, the purpose isn't happening, the vision isn't coming to pass, and they're trying to figure it all out by themselves. And so if you're stuck, I think you need to move beyond yourself and go, is there somebody more strategic that I can bring in that maybe thinks a little bit different, can see this from another perspective so that we can actually get to the systems and processes we need.
And sometimes they come from outside. We call these people consultants.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
You can hire professionals. Now, here's something I thought about as you were speaking, and let me throw it back at you. Should the process begin if we don't have all the how? In other words, if we don't have all the strategy, because people get stuck here too.
Yeah.
Like unless we have every I dotted and every T crossed. We're not going to move, and we get into things like analysis paralysis, and people get stuck. But is that where we are today? Is that we're telling people, hey, don't even get started unless you have the full picture of how to do it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say a really good way to think about it is when it comes to the how, do the next right thing that you have the time, resources, and people to do.
And knowledge.
Yeah,
right.
And knowledge. Do the next right thing that is in your capacity as a leader and your organization to do.
And then pivot from there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so you have to start. Otherwise, there really is no, before you have, true, proper, momentum, you have to create a little bit of movement. And so you got to take the next right step. You got to do the next right thing. And so don't be so overwhelmed that you don't have it all figured out, that you don't actually begin. Leaders begin. They start with what they've got, and they pivot, they adjust, they plan, they readjust, they do the rest, but they have to start.
And that start is what creates the energy, the synergy. That's what it means to begin to create direction.
Yeah.
I even love these YouTube videos where they're called startups. Is that correct? You know, and they sometimes they go up and they raise money and the product's not even created. Maybe they have a prototype, maybe they have a picture, but clearly they have the vision, they have the why, and now they're saying, hey, maybe we even need some finances, help us make this happen. But they're starting. I like that. Leaders start things. Like start that engine. Like just get going wherever you are. Yeah. Last comment.
Well, this is why I said, leaders don't always know the how. Leaders don't always know the how, but they start. And so I would say, absolutely. Begin to create movement. Begin to create clarity, and do the next right thing that is in your capacity to do.
I love it. So, in the 3's of direction and movement, we have the where, which is the vision. We have the why, which is the purpose, and the how, which is the way or the strategic part of it. Moses, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on the Leadership Center.